Hey, how's it going, everyone? Before we get into this next episode, I just want to give you all a quick reminder that if you haven't had a chance to yet, you need to give a listen to the other shows on the Extreme Performance Outdoor Network. If you haven't yet, just search Extreme with an X at the beginning, Performance Outdoor Network on any of your major podcast hosting platforms that you listen through, and give the other shows on the network a listen. There's a lot of great content on there, especially if you're into hounds and hunting with hounds. And also, whenever you give a listen to the rest of the network, you're supporting a network that gives back actively to the hunting and houndsman community and really works to preserve all the rights for all of those people involved. So if you haven't yet, like I said, give a listen. I'm sure you'll have fun. There's a lot of great content on those. And of course, by now, most of you are probably aware that the merch store is up and running at falconrychronicles.com. So if you've been wanting some merch up until now, as you know, it hasn't been available, but now it is. So if you want to contribute to supporting the podcast and the sustainability of it into the future, and also want some merchandise to wear around or drink out of, whatever the case might be, then head to falconrychronicles.com, buy you some merch, and every purchase, of course, goes to the continued support and future endeavors of the podcast, and to, of course, bring you all more content. So that being said, if you also haven't checked it out, it might be worth checking out the Extras Content membership. And if you want to hear more falconry follies and ratting episodes just to start with here, and also see some of the episodes in video format, then consider going to the Would You Like to Support link on my website. Sign up there. It's only $10 a month, and of course also goes a long way to supporting the sustainability of the podcast as well. So hope to see you there, and enjoy. And now, on to the next episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast.
So I got on one side of the pond, I got on behind the berm, and I went to fly the pond. And there's, go to flush, and the ducks going everywhere. It turned into kind of a rat hunt. So I'm running around the pond, and I run all the way around the side, all the way to the other side of the pond, and she catches a duck 50 yards away, right on the other side of this long, narrow pond. And I look, and right at the end of this pond, it's all green, pretty green grass. Like, okay, I can just run right across that green grass right at the tail of the pond. I'll get right to my bird. So I'm excited. So I start running, and the grass starts heaving. And I'm like, what is going on? And then I remembered this is right below the dairy. So what happens at the dairy?
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, and we are back in Texas again. This is one of the episodes that was recorded earlier this year at the Texas Hawking Association meet, and I am joined in this episode by Matt Reidy, and we talk about prairie falcons and longwing in general, and lots of other great stuff in this episode. And I wanted to make sure to get back and pay a visit to our friends in Texas again here. There's still a lot of episodes from that series that I haven't even released yet, and want to make sure that we get back on track a little bit with them as well here. So enjoy, and we're going to jump right into this episode with Matt Reidy, and hope you like it. Here we go. All right, man. Well, it's nice to meet you officially. Yeah. That's one of the things I really enjoy about all these meets, and getting a chance to, whenever the state clubs and stuff are kind enough to bring me out to do these, I've really come to enjoy getting a chance to know other people and see hawking in so many different places. And hopefully I'll get a chance to get out and see some longwing and stuff maybe tomorrow. I don't know. But,
sure.
We don't get a chance to see that very often, being from the Midwest and stuff. But,
fair enough.
But so, is that mostly, and we were kind of just talking a little bit, but is that mostly what you've kind of been into the last several years is longwings and stuff? Or?
Well, yeah. So I actually started when I was 16 in falconry. I'm 41 now, so I'm not too old, not too young, but I started before the big YouTube and all that. And so I remember writing letters when I was in high school to falconers asking about information on falconry. And, when I started, this is before passage peregrines were available. Obviously being a poor high school and college student, buying a bird wasn't really an option. And so, I started like most people did. You could fly either a kestrel or a red tail. And so I flew those. Then I got into Harris's hawks. I pretended to fly Cooper's hawks for a while, which was fun. I still love Cooper's hawks, but, wasn't for me. And then I think a lot of longwingers started before at Patches Peregrines with a hand-me-down falcon, and I started with a hand-me-down peregrine. I remember being a voracious reader, and I learned all I could about falconry, and I remember I got a book by Dan Cover named "Oh Those Wonderful Hawks," and I wrote him a letter when I was in high school, and his only sent me a short letter back and basically said, "The secret to falconry is find the bird that meets the quarry you have best access to, period." And so as I really tried to look around, I found that where I live in Texas, ducks are really good access. And so I never thought I'd become a longwinger, but it really became what fit best for me and how I live and what I do.
Nice. Yeah, no, and you're absolutely correct. I mean, it's, you said you listen to the podcast, and I mean, I think most people that listen, or, especially the people that aren't into falconry yet, that might like want to get into falconry, I hope that they keep hearing recurring themes in a lot of these episodes and recordings with all these different people. It really truly is pointless to do this if you don't have the prey base for the right type of bird, and
Absolutely.
If you're not willing to fly that type of bird on that type of prey base, then it's kind of just, you might as well just not even do it.
I agree. You got to have game. Yeah. That's the secret sauce, I guess. Mm-hmm. And figuring out what works for you. I don't have squirrels. Mm-hmm. I live in South Texas. Our trees are pretty short. So unfortunately, I can't be a squirrel hawker. I have squirrel hawked quite a bit in college, but where I live, that's not going to work. So that's not what I'm going to fly.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, do you enjoy that just as much as longwinging though?
Yeah, I do. I enjoy all forms of falconry. Mm-hmm. As long as there's game available. When I've done rabbit hawking where I live, it was about one flush every 30 minutes, and that's just not fun. I don't care. I know a lot of people do it, and that's fine, but I'd rather, that's a lot of work for one flush. Mm-hmm. And so, as long as the action is good and the quarry is available, whatever quarry it is, I'm all for it.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's, even though there's certain forms of falconry that might not be as, I don't know what people consider to be as like apex or whatever as others and stuff, that's sometimes I think what is nice, having those interim periods sometimes where, say, you can go and hawk, like kestrels on starlings and stuff. Sometimes, I mean, whenever you have to work really, really hard for your falconry to produce game for your bird, and sometimes it's nice to just be able to cruise around sometimes and, find sometimes those easy slips and things, those easier, I don't even want to say easier, but like more convenient, I guess, types of things. I mean, there's been some seasons where rabbits have been really down, like including this season. I mean, I actually kind of called my season early just because I was flying a bird for a friend, and some different circumstances have come up for me to where, I mean, we were having to work really, really hard to produce rabbits this year. Sure. And I don't know how it's been for other people, but I keep hearing across the country numbers have been kind of down. And so I was just like, well, you know what? I mean, we've got several birds still, and one less bird is that many more slips for everybody else. So I was just kind of like, well, whatever. But I mean, for people that have to work really hard to produce those amount of slips for their birds, I mean, I can kind of sympathize sometimes, with that. And I think all falconers, to some degree, go through periods where they sympathize with each other with that kind of thing. So
you also have to fit your falconry into modern life.
Sure.
A lot of us are working day jobs, and you don't have 5 hours in a day to go drive a long ways to find the game or things like that. And so you got to fit your falconry into your life. So that falconry life balance is a challenge. And that's why we have to find what works best where we live.
For sure. Yeah. And yeah, it's another important point too, for sure. I personally also envy the guys that can literally hawk all day, every day. I mean, and those people are few, I know, but the hat's off to them to be able to do it. I mean, there's far more people that I think mainly are able to just do it a few days a week, and stuff. I personally kind of am in between that. If I can't get out 3 to 4 days a week, then I feel like I'm just not going to do it. But that's
But, that's also kind of where things have evolved for me too. And I think there's always a little bit of a maturation process also.
Yes.
With that. So is that kind of how it developed for you also, through your career? I mean, you've been doing this way longer than I have.
Yeah, 25 years.
Yeah.
Been doing this my entire adult life. It's really becomes I love the cycle of life. I've really gotten to where I really enjoy it, where, hey, I know when season is. Do I want to be hawking in August in South Texas when it's 105? No, I don't. And I recognize that now. I've done it. I don't want to do it. And so, you find that cycle and you find what works for you. And for me, I have certain like benchmarks in my mind of what makes a good season or a bad season or how much effort and work I'm putting in. And I work a full-time job and I fly birds as much as I can. And I fly a lot. I mean, I do the math. And if I've got good falcons flying, I'm flying 2/3 of the available duck season days is what I'm flying. So that's averaging probably 4 or 5 days a week that I'm flying birds. So for me, that's how I measure it. I don't like measuring how many head did you catch, which I keep track. We all do. We can't help it. But I don't like measuring that. I like measuring how many days did I get my bird on game.
Yeah.
And that's how I measure it.
Yeah. No, and I think that there has to be some degree of a balance with that too. And once again, it just goes back to the maturation process. Like, I know it's so funny because I think we can all think back to whenever I say our first apprentice season, right? We wanted to be out there right September 1st, trying our best to get that first red tail and whatever. And that first one you trap is the one you got to keep and all this kind of stuff, and fast forward X amount of years later, I'm like, there's no way in hell I'm trapping a red tail in September anymore. I don't want to be out. It's like, where I live, I don't know how it is in other parts of but like, the Midwest, like where I live, I mean, the leaves aren't even falling off the trees until like mid-November half the time now. And so it's just like, you can be just slaving away out in the fields, just, dying in like mid 80s still, even through like mid to late October.
Oh, it'd be 90s where I'm at.
Yeah.
And even 100.
Yeah, with like 90% humidity at least. And for what, I especially if you're like a squirrel hawker, like you can, but is it like the premium conditions? No, it's not, so, but there's that initial mindset that we all have. It's just like, well, we just have to be doing it, and then like, as you kind of just go through the rigors and learn that, okay, well, it's really probably not most fun, Yeah,
the beauty of longwing of duck hawking is we have seasons. And we have to follow the seasons. For Texas, it doesn't start till November. So we have to wait till November anyway. And so, I don't even have to worry about that. Like, am I going to start early or not? Because I have a specific date that I can start. And I'm pretty happy with that because it forces me to kind of fit it where it fits.
So. Well, I mean, so if the season starts in November, when do you usually try and start getting your birds conditioned and trained and stuff and remanned and all that?
With a made falcon, it's pretty easy. I generally start dropping weight maybe 10 days to 2 weeks before season. And if it's a made falcon that I've had for several years, their first free flight is a duck pond. And I've had multiple years where their first free flight was a good pitch and a dead duck. Now I've had, other times where it didn't go as well, but I really, with a new bird, there's definitely a lot more training that goes into it. But once that falcon is a few years old and knows the game, you get him to the right weight and go hunting. It's that simple.
Yeah. I mean, my personal experience with longwings is not, as we just kind of touched on. I mean, living in the Midwest, there's only so much you can really do with them, but I have made the attempt, it's very, very limited, what my experience is. But from what I've heard, it is really interesting kind of the, the difference between kind of getting a falcon, even like an intermewed falcon, like going again at the start of the season versus like, hawks.
Oh, yes.
And it's just funny how different, the I don't know, kind of mindset of each type of bird is, going back into the season. Like you said, I mean,
they don't forget.
Yeah, exactly.
Once they know the game, they don't forget. And I have discussions a lot with friends that are, here in Texas. We're talking about longwinging all the time. And I think with a made bird, I don't generally have sitting issues or things like that early on or fitness issues. I think my secret to that is I fly in really good air in the afternoon when it's very easy to go up. Mm-hmm. And then, so it's not a big deal for them and initially. And so as they gain their fitness by hunting. And so maybe that's why I don't have any fitness issues. I don't generally drone, for a made bird. I literally get them down to weight and go. Their first free flight is, put them over a pond.
Mm-hmm. So you're one of those guys that, doesn't care to like let their birds thermal and stuff like that.
I love thermaling. Yeah. I love thermaling. Yeah. I really, so in the afternoons, and so I live in South Texas, so I'm south of San Antonio. I'm in the brush country. There's a lot of days that in the winter that are sunny and 5-mile-an-hour winds. Mm-hmm. It's pretty nice to let a bird thermal because they thermal straight up. So it works out pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, and this is this is one of the reasons why I like having conversations with hardcore longwingers, because I'm sure you've heard like, a lot of the different opinions, sure. from one long winger to the next, right? Absolutely. As far as, the whole thermaling thing, some guys will not fly their birds any other time than that hour after sunup, an hour before sunset to avoid thermaling and this, that, and the other. And some guys are like, no, just let them thermal. Hell, if it takes 45 minutes to an hour to set up a slip, so be it, whatever. And so, I mean, it's just funny, hearing differing opinions from falconer to falconer, especially long wingers. Yeah. But I mean, so that's cool though. I mean, what's your average, what kind of average pitch do you try and shoot for?
Every bird's different. Mm-hmm. It really depends on the situation. I will tell you that when I started in falconry, every bird was new, right? Mm-hmm. It's from a kestrel to a red tail to a Harris hawk to a male Harris to a female Harris. It's all this new different things. When you've been doing this a while and you find the niche that you're going to do, it's not about them doing the new thing. It's about doing what works for you and that you enjoy. And I have really learned, and this is no judgment on anyone else, but I know what I want to see. Mm-hmm. And my goal is to get that, I guess, bracket of what I want to see, that level of what I want to see. And that's what I want to try to get as many times as I can in a season. Mm. And so, I have had 2,000-foot pitches where I've caught a duck, and that's in thermals. But I've also had 500-600 foot, with no thermals pitches. Where I live with all that brush and there's a lot of ponds, super high pitches can sometimes be detrimental. But I just love that aspect. And I guess what I love about the thermals, I would say that makes me pretty excited is when that falcon is 3/4 of a mile away and 2,000 feet up, and it's still connected to what you're doing. That's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And so it's all and with thank you, Marshall, for GPS. So as I get older, my eyesight's not as good. I used to be able to see a bird at, I could probably see a bird at 2,000 feet when I was young. Now I probably still could if I try, but I don't have to try because I have GPS. But that's what I think why I really love the thermals is realizing that I'm flying primarily passage falcons. I've been only flying passage falcons for the last 10 years probably. And it's really amazing to think there is a wild falcon that is 1/2 a mile, 3/4 a mile away, 2,000 feet up, and it completely knows what we're doing and is fully on board and coming right back to me from my flesh. That's why I think I like the thermals.
Yeah, and seeing the stoop from that high is totally cool too. I'm not poo-pooing on anybody's preferences by any stretch, but having had a chance to see, I don't know, a handful of times now, and even also in a couple of different countries, like, how some of these guys do these different things with, the different pitches and seeing what the preferences are and stuff like that. It is pretty cool to hear that just giant like cutting of wind as that bird comes down from such a high altitude and everything. But kind of like you said, there's so many places though that I see that's just not practical, like kind of like what you just touched on. And I know like if I was to try and do it where I'm at, I wouldn't be able to do it much more than a couple hundred feet in the air, or a few hundred feet or so would probably be the limit, because there's just so much different land issues in
Yes.
between, the water and everything else. So, so it's primarily duck hawking that what you do for the most part. Then
that's what I got. Duck hawking is what I got. It's also pretty unique in that I don't really have mallards. I have everything else, but I don't really. Mallards don't get to the country where I hunt, and so that's another unique thing is that mallards are. When I come to places like Lubbock and I see mallards, it's exciting. Whereas I know a lot of people in the rest of the country are like, "Oh, another mallard." For me, it's kind of neat to see because I think in 16 years I have flushed mallards where I live like 3 times total.
And see, like, and you just it's kind of funny you just said that because where I'm at, it's pretty much all we have is mallards. Yep. So it's, every so often you'll see, aside from, so-and-so's peking ducks or whatever,
Sure.
That they keep in their, in their personal ponds or whatever and all that kind of crap. Mallards pretty much is all we have. So yeah, it's interesting, and I envy the people that have that wide assortment.
It's cool. It's neat. It's neat because you never know what's to be on the pond. My bread and butter is gadwall. Probably 60% of the ducks I catch are gadwall, and then smattering of widgeon and pintail and teal and ringnecks, stuff like that. So it's a mixed bag and it's fun. But yeah, that's the interesting part is like mallards are not even there at all, and so it's kind of gives me a little bit more flexibility on birds that I can fly and how I want to fly. And like I said, I have what I want to see and what I want to make happen. And that's different. It's not different, but every longwinger has their own flight that they want to make. And so that's what we work towards. Mm-hmm. So we try to get that as many times a season as we can.
Sure. Yep. Well, and yeah, because that's what you're supposed to do. Yep. And ultimately it's supposed to be fun. And if you're not doing what you think is fun, then this is pointless to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. You're just spinning your wheels and we've all been there too, I think. We've all had those seasons that just, are just God.
I'm having one of those right now.
Really?
Yep. I had a falcon die this year. It was not AI. We tested for it, but it did die. And then I lost another falcon as well. And I'm actually training a new passage prairie falcon this year. So it's a very weird year for me because normally I'm flying 2 made falcons and I'm catching quite a few ducks every season. And this is the year that it's like everything fell apart and I'm in the training mode. And so it's just a different year, but I've been through this before, been doing this long enough. And so it's just work through the process and get to where I want to be.
Yeah, I think we all just hope that we have more good seasons than bad.
Absolutely.
It really, when it is as much as we can sit and expound upon all these different aspects of things, in reality, that's all we're ever really hoping for is just to have more good than bad.
Of course. Of course. I think if it was all bad, we wouldn't do it.
No.
But that's the whole point. It's just getting out there and enjoying it and really embracing the opportunity to be outdoors.
Yeah. So if you don't mind me asking then, what did you find out killed your bird?
I don't know, actually.
You still don't know?
I did not do a full histopath.
Okay.
I tested for avian influenza, for a couple other viruses, Newcastle disease, as well as West Nile, and it wasn't not viruses. The bird actually did show neurological signs, so that's why we're like, oh, could it be West Nile? But it wasn't. And it was just everything was fine. And then he started going down. It was a little male tundra peregrine, and it was 3 years old. He was a great flying bird, but he just started going down the drain. And when they're little birds like that, like you have no time.
No.
And so it was a shock, and that was like my plan for the season was to fly the heck out of him, and just didn't happen.
Right.
So
no, I understand. I mean, I don't know if you've heard any of the episodes that I've talked about, that imprint prairie that I, raised and stuff, and was just about ready to having him flying kind of where I wanted him to be and everything, and really start flying on an actual game. And then overnight I just walk in the kitchen, he's dead.
Yep.
Yeah. And, come to find out, I had bagged him on that, one duck or whatever the week before. And, whenever I had Arno do the necropsy on him, he asked if he had eaten any duck recently. And I had no idea up until that point that there was that strain of bacteria that ducks often carry and stuff that can just kill a bird, in like no time flat. And it just kind of, it's just one of the many bazillion, other things that just makes you kind of take pause sometimes in what you're doing. But I didn't know if you had any experience or lost any other birds as much as you've been duck hawking over the years. You know,
I've lost birds that have flown off. They probably were predated, but because I couldn't find them. I've not had one. I had one die from hitting a fence. My first passage prairie falcon. This is why I hate widgeon. It was a drake widgeon, flushed it from a pond, and the widgeon went for a fence. This prairie, like the thermal, was super high, and it basically went over water and went through other ponds to find this fence and to scrape the falcon off, and the falcon hit the fence. And I thought she might make it, but she died within about 36 hours, 48 hours of hitting the fence. But that's, besides this falcon that died this year, that's the only falcon that I've had die. I've lost a few, but other than that, just the fence.
Yeah. So it's just been more environmental type stuff and physical structures and things like that, as opposed to any kind of, bugs or any like
I think one thing I do is, and I didn't ever do this because of AI. I'll tell you why I did it. And for those that duck hawk will totally understand where I'm coming from. I used to open up the duck and give him the heart and the liver and all that of every duck. But what I found throughout the winter is duck blood is very, it tears up your skin. So if you're opening up ducks every day, like my skin would start to crack.
Really?
Yeah, like really bad. And I was moisturizing, you're getting all the moisturizer from your friend, your girlfriend or whatever, and trying to do all that. And my skin would crack like crazy. And so I started transferring to the lure and not opening the duck. And I didn't have the skin problems. My skin wasn't cracking because I wasn't getting it was always I'm left-handed. So it was always my left hand. It was only my left hand. It was the one that was basically opening up the duck every time.
It's
and
nuts.
so yeah, I just found that I don't open up the ducks. Now I cut them up and when I take them home and all that, but a lot of times now I wear gloves when I clean them and stuff like that. And I find that my skin, doesn't crack like it used to.
Do you have any idea what is in
the iron in the blood?
Is it really?
Yep. It just really dries out your skin really bad.
Huh.
So if you're one of the guys that will open up every duck and you end up with your thumb cracking, the skin around that and all that, that's what it's from. It's from the duck blood.
I'll be damned.
Yeah. So.
No. Well, that's another reason why I like doing this stuff too and having these conversations. I always learn something myself too. That's I had no idea.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it's ducks are something that up until now I've never really, focused on for the most part.
Sure.
But that's something I'll definitely keep in mind. I don't know if I'll have, I don't know if I'll ever hunt them consistently enough to wherever I have to worry about that problem. But but no, that's interesting. Yep. Yeah. Well, I mean, learn something new every day, man. That's awesome. Yeah. But I mean, as far as like, I know you mentioned that you're flying a prairie now. Mm-hmm. I mean, what is your favorite long wing to fly after having flown? You primarily have that be your focus for all these years now.
I will say that I really love prairie falcons. Mm-hmm. So when I started in falconry, passage peregrines weren't available. And so, captive bred peregrines was the way to go. And then I heard all the horror stories about prairie falcons. And so you're scared to try prairie falcons because how horrible they are. And, all those things I heard about how mean they are and how difficult they are to work with and all those kinds of things. And so, there was a year, I ended up seeing Jimmy Walker had a tiercel prairie a passage prairie that was great. And I remember getting to see that bird fly multiple times. And so I'd cut my teeth on several captive bred peregrines. And I was like, you know what? I want to try a prairie. And I was younger and, full of myself a little bit, like, hey, I'll try it. And, it was tough to get through. And I'm actually, we're at the THA meet. I'm giving a presentation tonight on passage prairie falcons. So I could go all over my perspective on passage prairie falcons. But getting through that process and getting that bird going was really fun. And then once I got her made, amazing, just amazing things. One of the things that she did, I never caught it up with her first season, but her second season when it really kicked off, and she would go really high. She liked the thermal, and she would come down. And what does everyone know prairies for? They hit hard, mm-hmm. and there ain't no doubt they hit hard. The things that bug me about peregrines are, one, that they don't always hit very hard. They usually try to kind of like push the duck down or something like that, and anyone who flies peregrines will totally know what I'm talking about. The victory lap. They hit a duck and they make this giant victory lap. And sometimes, actually quite often, and from my perspective, is the duck will get up and get back to the water. And you're like, why didn't you just turn around? Prairie falcons, they hit and they do the fastest wing over I think you'd ever see. It's amazing how fast. My one prairie falcon, this is, I don't think people appreciate what she did, but she was up super high and it was a group of about 20 or 30 ducks got off the pond and she vertical stooped through and she killed a drake pintail in the stoop, falling straight down and spun around and caught it before it hit the ground. So she flew through it, spun around and caught it before it hit the ground. That's how fast her wing over was. And that's how these prairie falcons are. Everyone I've had, their wing over is, they hit hard and their wing over is really fast. So those things that annoy you about the peregrine, the prairie doesn't have. But there are things about the prairies that are very annoying, but those pieces are definitely the hallmark of a prairie falcon, for sure.
Yeah. And I've always heard that thing, that kind of thing too about prairies. And, I mean, and I do agree. I mean, whenever I was serving pigeons to the one that I was training, I mean, they do hit, whenever they want to hit, they'll hit. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And, but, the other thing that you oftentimes hear about prairies from guys that have tried, sometimes even successfully or unsuccessfully, either one, is that sometimes they have prairies. Sometimes they have how do I want to phrase this? Sometimes they have a hard time getting prairies to take a higher pitch, and stuff too. I mean, have you found that to be an issue?
So I guess it depends on what you mean by higher pitch.
Well, let me clarify. Above 500 feet.
Sure. I would say that any bird, from my perspective, from a bird's perspective, they're going to do whatever it takes to get the job done, right? And so if you're willing to flush at 200 feet and they're successful at 200 feet, that's what they're going to give you. And that's a peregrine, that's a gyre, that's whatever. And I think with prairie falcons, and I've had some low-flying prairie falcons, 200, 300-foot pitch prairie falcons quite often, of that they're going to do what works, and that's what they're going to do, and they're going to consistently do that. And it's getting them into the process is really difficult, and so maintaining the discipline to keep them flying high is really hard. So you just want to get them successful. So you take what they'll give you to get them successful. And so that's probably why you'd have to be very, very disciplined to maintain that really high pitch. And I would bet that most people flying passage female peregrines will tell you the same thing, that getting them to maintain the high pitch is also hard, because the same way, I don't want to say that they're lazy, but they're going to do what it takes to succeed. And so unless you're extremely disciplined, they're going to do just what it takes to succeed.
Yeah, and I've heard that a lot too. Yeah, I mean, and it's kind of like they know that they don't have to, so they won't, kind of thing.
Are you going to run, 2 miles to the grocery store if the grocery store is only a block away? No,
sure.
You're not.
Yeah.
So I think that's just the way it is. They're animals. They do what works for them. And so that's where I think you get that from, is they give you what works for them.
Sure. Well, and there's also a lot of people that kind of, I don't know, just from their observances of prairies and nature and stuff, they're not necessarily known for being, really high altitude, kind of stoop, hunting type birds in some locations or areas. Like some people have kind of witnessed them being more of like pursuit, like, lower, even like sometimes ground quarry and stuff like that too from, but I mean, I guess it's probably just like anything else, whatever their environment is going to allow them to do, they're going to do.
Absolutely.
Same type of thing.
I think it's just all hunting style. I haven't spent a lot of time watching prairie falcons in the wild, but I've trapped quite a few prairie falcons. And I remember a specific instance of, there was a feedlot I was around, and there was one prairie that I was watching, hoping to try to trap her. And she was doing that real fast pursuit, real low through everything. And I was like, okay, cool, whatever. And she wasn't successful. So she went and sat in a pole, and I'm like trying to get my stuff together, and she vanished. And I look, and she was just climbing up, 500, 600, 700 feet up. And I'm like, what is she doing? And then she just folded and stooped and caught something. And so I witnessed both hunting styles in the same bird in the span of about 15 minutes. And then with my prairies, like my first one, when I first started trying ducks with her, I would let her go and she would just scream up pumping as hard as she could all the way up. She'd go. I didn't have GPS at the time. And of course, we always overestimated pitch back then.
Of course.
But she was probably going to 400, 500, 600 feet. And then she would just drift downwind and I have to go pick her up a mile away. The first time I got her to catch a duck, it was no wind and she was still right above the pond and I was able to make it work. But that was what she did. Like you let her go and she would just go up. And so I don't know why. I don't know why that was what worked for her, but that's what she did. So
right, because that's what she was doing before you got her. I mean, it would be my guess, right?
So I think they're all successful and they find what works for them. And again, why go to 500 feet if 200 feet is going to kill a duck just fine?
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of guys, settle for, I wouldn't even say settle's probably a bad word, but just kind of go and not try and fight, fight against the grain, so to speak.
Sure. I think if you're, I don't know. For me, if I want the super high pitches, I'm flying in thermals, and it works for my work schedule. I take the afternoons off to fly, so it just kind of works for me that I end up getting a lot of thermal flights. Yeah. So that's just how it works.
Cool. Yeah. Well, and you kind of mentioned a little bit about your work and stuff. You were talking to me a little bit about that before we started recording, but I think since you brought that up, I mean, you mentioned that you do do like the biology type of stuff, right? And
sure.
And I mean, just kind of talk a little bit about kind of what what you do, and just go into kind of how that's affected your falconry. Then,
sure.
Yeah.
So I'm actually a wildlife biologist. I got a bachelor's and a master's in wildlife biology, and I actually work for Texas Parks and Wildlife, for a state agency. My job is not the falconry program, but my job is actually to work with private landowners and provide advice to private landowners. But my agency has been really gracious, and it allows me to be involved in the falconry program quite a bit. I was involved in the helping write our falconry regulations back in 2009 when we had to update them for the Fed. So that was really neat to be part of that. And then I provide a lot of guidance to our falconry program as far as what's acceptable and what's not as a falconer. And I know it's kind of a heavy, I feel very honored that I'm able to do that. And it's been really great to be able to help the agency and the falconers as well to kind of understand how the falconry program works and that kind of stuff. So I definitely feel very fortunate for that. And it's a lot of fun to be able to see that aspect. But it's also a challenge because I have to wear the biologist hat. I'm not wearing a falconer's hat when I'm working in the agency. I'm wearing the biologist hat with falconry experience. And my friends in this Texas Hawking Association and in Texas recognize that. And that's the game I play. And it's been really great to be able to help falconry in Texas that way. From the rewriting of the regulations to when we first opened up peregrine take, I was very involved in that. And so that's been really gratifying to get to do something that's positive for falconry, but also positive for the state agency. Mm-hmm. For sure.
So, I mean, your job allows you then to kind of split up your days, like you mentioned then. So you kind of work a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the afternoon, and stuff like that. Is it pretty flexible, or? I
have a very flexible schedule. I get to make my own schedule for the most part. I am a workaholic. I'll fully admit that. I love to work. I'll be honest. I do. I love to work. I love what I do. But a lot of times during falconry season, I'll start work at 6 a.m. so I can be done at 2 or 3 p.m. so I can go fly. Or there's days where I might have a presentation at night. So I'll work in the night. So then I'll take a little bit less off, some time off during the day or the next day or something like that. So that's what makes falconry really possible for me, is that extremely flexible schedule to where I can usually fit falconry in multiple days a week without an issue. Mm. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I mean, it's nice that your job then allows you basically to do a lot of your work outside normal business hours in that capacity. That's pretty cool.
And I'll say this, if anyone's listening to the podcast, we actually hire quite a few wildlife biologists for jobs like mine. If you've got a wildlife degree and you're a falconer and you want to work with private landowners, look at Texas Parks and Wildlife. We actually we got quite a few wildlife jobs open right now. And it is, you set yourself up, you work really hard, and you can have pretty dang good falconry and still work 40-hour work weeks.
Nice.
So
nice.
Well, here's my plug.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully that'll still be applicable whenever, this is released and stuff.
Oh, it will be.
Yeah.
We're going to be hiring quite a few more over the next year or so.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. No, it'll be released by then. Yeah. No, that's awesome though, man.
Yeah.
Working healthcare for as many years as I have now, I mean, that's the only it's one of, I guess, the silver linings with that is I usually have like 4 days off a week that I can try. And
nice.
I mean, whenever you work like 3/12s a week, it affords you some degree of flexibility.
Yep.
You still lose sleep because, you know, especially like someone like me works night shift and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's nice whenever you have a career that will afford you that flexibility rather than, you know, a typical 9 to 5 whenever it's pretty much, you know, dark when you go to work and dark whenever you get home, you know,
it's
kind of
impossible to, I consider that impossible to do falconry with any, you know, in the modern, what I talked about earlier, modern life, like doing falconry in the modern life, living in a city, working 9 to 5 I feel like it's impossible. I know some people make it work, but man, the challenges compared to myself where I actually live in the country and I have that flexible schedule for the most part, I can make that work. So I'm blown away, and I'm really impressed by people that work corporate jobs or work, you know, full time, you know, those kinds of jobs, and I still practice great falconry. I mean, they're more hardcore than I can be, and that's pretty amazing. So
yeah, it's tough. I mean, because whenever you get a chance to hawk with people regularly that have a chance to get out more often, and also get out with people who don't have that, you know, there is a struggle sometimes with consistency and just that troubleshooting aspect. You know, whenever you don't get a chance to do it quite as often and you're mainly just restricted to weekends and stuff, it throws a whole other curveball, you know, in your evaluation process and your and the reading of your bird and stuff. It's much longer learning curve sometimes whenever you're trying to get used to a new bird.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, sometimes, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, if there's a will, there's a way, and yeah, I mean, people just do what they have to do. But I mean, I know for me, it would be hard continuing to justify to do it if I wasn't able to do it at least 3 to 4 times a week. You know what I mean?
I'm in the same.
Yeah.
And when I talk to apprentices or pre-apprentices, I always tell them that, like, you know, minimum of 3 days a week, 4 days a week would be better to be able to fly a bird, you know, and fly them on game. And I say this all the time. We probably have the best access in the history of falconry, modern falconry, to raptors. We have passage peregrine take, prairie falcons, captive bred birds, you name it. Like getting a falcon or a hawk is easy. We probably have the worst access to game in the modern history of falconry in this country. And that's not going to get better. And so getting the bird's the easy part. Finding and catching game consistently is extremely difficult. And it's sad, but it's the truth.
Yeah, and that's something I talk about all the time with people. And, you know, that's something else that I figure it's probably going to be the next thing we discuss here is, you know, with your constant kind of interaction with all these private landowners and stuff. Sure. I mean, yeah, what do you think is going to be the best solution to try and stave that off? I mean, like you said, more and more people are wanting to get into falconry, but we keep losing more and more spots. So
yeah, I don't have an answer. I really don't. You know, game populations are difficult access to, and especially for when the majority of people are living in cities, right? So if you could be 2 hours outside of a city, if you can be in a small town, getting access to game is may not be as difficult. But living in, say, the middle of downtown Fort Worth, and how far do you have to drive to get out of Fort Worth just to get maybe started with whatever? That's the difficult part. And the majority of people live in the cities. And then a lot of these people that are getting into the sport are non-traditional background, right? By non-traditional, I mean, they're not ranch kids or farm kids that hunted all their life. And so they're starting from, with a lot to learn. And there's some amazing ones that are amazing falconers now at this point, but they definitely start a little bit behind the 8 ball compared to someone that grew up in the country. And like I said, getting access to game is really hard. And so I just don't know how. I don't have a good solution. I really don't. You just gotta, if you want to do falconry, I hate to say, you have to make it a priority.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, I was one of those people that had no prior hunting background too. You know, so I mean, it's
perfect example.
Yeah, and you know, I'll never consider myself amazing by any stretch, but you know, I think that the people that are going to really take to it and be successful are the ones that are willing to sacrifice and kind of mold their life to some degree around it. And if they don't,
Absolutely.
and if they don't listen or don't make those exceptions, then they're going to struggle a lot more than the people that will.
And, so I started in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
The internet was still around, but we didn't have iPhones. We didn't have social media. I will say that it's so much easier to find people and to get information and to get involved and learn than it was when I started. Because guys, when I said before, I wrote letters as a 16-year-old kid to falconers wanting to learn about falconry. I don't think anyone's written a letter in how long to learn about falconry. And so, I even see it in myself, like starting in falconry, most of the people that I knew were older. And so I was a kid. I was the kid running around. And now I have a contingent of friends across the country that are my age that I talk to quite often on social media. So, access to raptors is great. Access to game is bad. Access to information is amazing. And so and if you want to be a successful falconer, the access to information to be a successful falconer is all out there, all over the place to learn and to find the people that are doing it successfully. So that's where I think the community of falconry has really been very helpful to get people successful. And that's where this podcast and clubs and things like that are really valuable, is showing success and teaching success and promoting success.
Yeah. And hopefully most people's resources nowadays are going to keep reiterating the same really important points, being, like we have already kind of talked about, if you're not willing to match the bird with the prey base that you have, then, and if you're not willing to put in the time and so on and so forth,
able to, for that matter.
Yeah. And it's just, I'm sure that, we all know that there's pitfalls now with how easy it is to find information too. You got to take the good with the bad.
You got to learn how to filter through it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to just siphon your way through it. Yeah.
I bet people these days are that their bullshit reader is probably getting better every year because of the amount of information that we get. So I'm hoping that, but there's a lot of crappy information, but there's also a lot of really good information.
Yeah.
So for sure.
Well, and I'm sure that, it's kind of like whenever you're back in the letter writing days too. You only have a list of names and so many people that you can write a letter to. So I will say that I'm sure that there was probably it's a lot harder to siphon your way through the reputable type stuff but at the same time, you're almost forced then to get out with certain people so you can see for yourself and learn firsthand, whereas you can get information from people literally anywhere around the world that may not be dealing with your particular circumstances either. So, it's
a double-edged sword.
Exactly.
It's a double-edged sword, absolutely.
Exactly.
But I think overall it's a positive for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, it's good that, like I said, I'm happy for anybody that I talk to that is able to have the flexibility and be able to kind of mold their professional life in around, their falconry and their families and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So that's cool, man. I'm happy for you. But, as far as, everything else with your falconry though, you've already told some pretty neat stories, but as you know, we always like to get, a couple of the more memorable or favorite ones from people that, are on the podcast and stuff. So go ahead and what's your more memorable story that always pops into your head first and foremost, or favorite bird?
Sure. So one of my favorite stories I like to tell is, so there's and I still actually hunt this place. There's a dairy that I fly. And it's, the dairies, they got a lot of property and they got a lot of ponds, which is great. They have their dairy where they do all the work where they're getting the milk from the cows. And right below that dairy is this nice long pond directly below the dairy. And, there was a day when I was checking ponds and I could not find any ducks, and I saw ducks on this pond right below the dairy. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it. And this pond was probably about 50 yards wide by probably 150 yards long. So relatively big pond. And I had a maid, captive bred, an autumn peregrine that I was flying named Playa. And, so I got on one side of the pond, I got on behind the berm and I went to fly the pond, and, there's go to flush and the ducks going everywhere. It turned into kind of a rat hunt. So I'm running around the pond and I run all the way around the side, all the way to the other side of the pond. And she catches a duck 50 yards away, right on the other side of this long, narrow pond. And I look, and right at the end of this pond, it's all green, pretty green grass. Like, okay, I can just run right across that green grass right at the tail of the pond. I'll get right to my bird. So I'm excited. So I start running and the grass starts heaving. And I'm like, what is going on? And then I remembered this is right below the dairy. So what happens at the dairy?
Yes. I saw where this was kind of going.
And so as that started moving and shaking, and I got, and of course I'm not stopping because I'm not smart enough to stop. And I end up in the middle of this pond and I fall through, and I fall all the way through to my armpits. And all I could think was, I'm about to drown in quick shit. And 100 years from now, somebody's going to find my body and they're going to be, or maybe 1,000 years from now, encased in cow shit. And they're going to wonder, what was this person doing? What is the stuff that they had? How did they do that? And that was what came to my mind. Like I literally thought that because I could not feel the bottom and I was in just this muck and what do I do? So luckily I stopped in my armpits and I just sit there for a second and I just start kind of crawling, swimming, slithering my way over to, of course, I'm not going to go back to where I came. I'm going to my bird. So I get to my bird and I am covered in quick shit from basically my armpits down. And I get to my bird, get her, transfer her off, get her hooded, get her back to the car. I get back to the car. And I was driving a little Subaru at the time, so I had an SUV. And so I put my bird up and what do? I strip down to my underwear, of course. So I stripped down to my underwear and jump in my car and I'm 45 minutes from home. And I'm like, okay, so I'm start driving home and I call my girlfriend. I'm like, hey, when I get home, can you bring me some boots and some pants? Wait, it's dark. I don't need pants. She said, what happened? So yeah. So I seriously thought I was going to die in quick shit. So
yeah. Sport of Kings, everybody. Yeah. For everyone listening, just remember, this is the Sport of Kings.
Yep.
Yeah. This is you're upper echelon in society if you do this.
So I will say I have never flown that pond since. But if you ever get access to a dairy and there's a pond directly below where they milk the cows, just recognize what you're about to get into.
Yeah. It's kind of like those drainage ponds that are right next to gas stations. They're not there for aesthetics.
No. Definitely not.
Definitely not. Yeah. No, that's it seems like most longwingers have one of those. It doesn't matter if they're like a micro longwinger, like a Merlin guy or it seems like everyone has some kind of shit story. That fly long
part wings. Of it. I mean, absolutely part of it. Like that's, I think, most of where we fly involves cattle, and cattle involve a lot of shit. Bottom line.
Yeah, geez. Yeah. Yep. Sport of Kings. That's all you can really say about that. No, that's hilarious, man. Yeah. No. And once again, I mean, think of how much worse the story would be though if your bird hadn't caught.
This is true.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have fallen in quick shit if I hadn't caught a duck. So I mean, it's totally, absolutely. So.
Well, I mean, there's always those like false alarm situations too. Sometimes where your bird's on the ground, you think it's on something, too, and it would have been even worse though if you would have already been armpit level. And then your bird flew off. Oh
yes. Oh gosh. Yeah, that would have been miserable. Absolutely. And lucky for me, living in South Texas, it doesn't get cold very often. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of times where I'm hawking in short sleeves, even in December and January. Not always, but there's a lot of times where I am. So falling into quick shit there, that wasn't dangerous because again, it wasn't cold enough for me to be like, really in trouble. So going places where it's actually cold is, and duck hawking makes me much more uncomfortable because I'm just not used to that. I'll jump in a pond to do something where I live because most of the times it's 60, 70 degrees outside.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I hope that your game bag that you were wearing at the time wasn't too expensive either. I hope all that.
I still wear it. I washed it a bunch, but I still use it. It was a Pinio vest.
Oh well,
I still have the Pinio vest.
Yeah,
so you can't get rid of that.
You can't get rid of a Pinio. Man.
It was a good time. It was fun.
No, thanks for sharing. No, that's hilarious. Yeah. No, well, I mean, I guess now then would be a good time to go ahead and transition then and get that, that really, I don't know, like whatever your favorite sentiment piece of advice, to go ahead and give people and stuff that are either currently in or wanting to get into the sport, and then we can get ready and wrap it up, I guess.
I said it before, find the bird that fits the quarry that you can hunt every day, period. That's the way it goes, and that's what you find. That's the most important part, like finding it. We are so focused, and especially new people are so focused on the birds, on the falcons or the hawks. They're not focused on the game. And we need to realize that we need to be focused on the game and then find the bird that fits that game. Mm-hmm. And that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it is really easy, especially early on in a falconry career, to just kind of look past that kind of stuff. Because at that point you haven't really had to struggle yet, or some people struggle early, and I think sometimes those people end up being a little better off in the long run, to be honest.
Struggle is good. This is a hard sport, and perseverance is what you need to do well in this sport. And if you don't have that, you're not going to. So a little bit of struggle is good. Definitely. And it's just a lot of people, myself included, love birds of prey. I guess that's a story. If you have a time, I'll tell a story of how I got into falconry. This is kind of a good story.
Yeah.
When I was in first grade, I was at a Catholic school in Temple, Texas, and a guy came to my school and had a slideshow. This is, again, I'll show you how old I was, slideshow presentation on following peregrine falcons on migration by telemetry with his airplane. And as a little first grade kid, fastest animal in the world, oh my gosh, I was hooked. I could have been a lawyer or a doctor or some rich businessman. Now I'm a wildlife biologist. Why? Because a guy came to my first grade class and talked about peregrine falcons. And I remember going home, and remember, we didn't have internet then, but my dad had encyclopedias. And I remember pulling out the F and seeing falcon and then falconry. And I can see to this day a picture of an adult peregrine falcon on someone's fist in the encyclopedia. And I was hooked as a first grade kid. And from first grade on, I knew I wanted to do something with birds of prey.
Cool. Yeah, I'm glad we circled back on that real quick then, because I remember like early in the conversation, we kind of touched on, the book that you read and stuff that also kind of spurred your interest and stuff. But, like I said, it seems like there's always just that one moment where the spark, where that click happens and people are just kind of forever, fascinated or enthralled by it. And where it grows from there is always different from person to person.
Absolutely.
But yeah, well, at least you're one of those people too that was able to get into it young.
Yes.
And I've said it many times before, but I'm always kind of envious to some degree of the people that were able to make it part of their life early, so that then they could kind of have that consideration as their life, evolved and moved forward, as opposed to someone like me that was already in, like their early 30s, and some of these guys that are even substantially older, already retired, for example, and get into it and stuff like that. That always boggles, my mind too, because there's the physical aspect of it that, that to
or
contend
even
with too.
The family aspect. I've been doing falconry as an adult my entire adult life. So it's very hard for me to empathize with someone that has a wife and kids or a husband and kids, and they want to do falconry, and how that affects their family. And I think that's really important in our modern age, for sure, to recognize that, and for someone that's interested in falconry with that family to really be self-reflective on what that's going to do. So that's something I didn't think about until I've heard other friends of mine talk about that. Because like I told you, my whole life from the time I was 16 on has been falconry focused. Falconry has been a part of my life. So I can never truly understand that. So
yeah, no. And there's extra hurdles that are going to come up, speaking from personal experience and stuff too. Hell, I still remember the first time I was talking to my wife about it. She's like, "You're not going to do that," whatever. And I'm like, "Yeah, I am." And we're both we both understand each other well enough to know that we're both very strong-willed individuals. That if we say that we aren't going to do something, it's either going to or not going to be done.
Yep.
ended up being done, and now it's just kind of like whatever, it's just part of our normal lives and stuff. So either then that's the thing, that's, it's the whole divorce rate thing in falconers too. You just,
sure. No, it's true. I mean, it's a passion of your life. And, for me, I'm glad that it's only a certain time of the year. Right. It's, 5 months out of the year that I'm extremely intense, because it's nice to have that intensity in other directions and be able to, get the honeydews done and all those other things. So no, I really, it's a true, stir of passions and a true driver of your life if you're going to do it and do it successfully.
Totally agree, man. Well, I mean, this has been fun. And is there any other last thing that you can think of that we didn't, talk about or cover that you would have liked to or anything? Or? No,
I just appreciate you coming. Been an officer of the Texas Hawking Association for many years, been a member for many years. And it's been, it's really great to kind of get a lot of this stuff, recorded, and especially a lot of our other members that have been around much longer than I have recorded. So I really appreciate you.
No. And I appreciate the opportunity. I just hope that throughout the next however many years that I'm able to, or still, can justify continuing to to put all the time into this and stuff, that I'll be able to, get as many different states, clubs and stuff stories and, or members stories and stuff. And man, it's my pleasure. I'm glad that people are still listening and like it, so, cool. I appreciate y'all having me down, and, like I said, it's been fun, and hopefully the rest of the meet goes well, and, you get you something else in the game bag before the weekend's over.
See what we can do.
Yeah. All right, man. Awesome.